Hello, Bears fans. If you've learned anything about me over my 6 years drafting for Chicago, it's that I need help, especially with my first-round picks. There was Kevin White and Leonard Floyd. And then my biggest investment, Mitch Trubisky. And I know you won't let me forget about Adam Shaheen in round 2. But those mistakes are a thing of the past because now I watch Draft on Tap.
Good choice, Ryan. Draft on Tap features Danny Shimon and Neil Stopchinski, two outstanding draft prospect evaluators. This season, they are totally focused on the Chicago Bears' needs and prospects that fit their team. Additionally, their guest list will include some of the most prominent names in scouting. So Ryan, bro, thanks for doing what thousands of others are going to start doing. Watching Draft on Tap with Danny Shimon and Neil Stopchinski, only on the Barroom Network. We could all use a little bit of help, right, Ryan? The following program is for mature audiences only. Football talk shows, most of them sound like this. Blah, 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 blah. Not this one. That's because it features the former director of college scouting with the Chicago Bears. He worked on the staff that drafted, the likes of Devin Hester, Olin Kreutz, Lance Briggs. He's the man who takes shit from absolutely nobody. He's Greg Gabriel. Gabriel joins longtime Chicago sports reporter David Schuster. And this is, accordingly, Gabriel Schuster Talk Bears.
And welcome into the Gabriel Schuster podcast. It's video style. And Greg, I've just been notified. I wanted to wear this prop just for a couple of seconds, but I've just been notified that I've been let out of the witness protection program, so I guess I can take this off right now. But I am David Schuster, and that good-looking guy on the other part of the screen here is Mr. Greg Gabriel, who really doesn't need any introduction. This is our second podcast of the week. Of course, on our first one, we always go over the game preceding, and now with this one, we're going to take a look ahead at the game coming up at Soldier Field on Sunday. That's when the 3-0 Bears go against the 2-1 Indianapolis Colts. And we'll be hearing from Matt Nagy during this podcast. We'll hear from Nick Foles. We'll also hear from Allen Robinson. That's all coming up in just a little bit. But, Greg, we're 3 weeks into the season, and the Bears are just one of only 3 teams in the NFL that are still undefeated. So let's take a quick look at Sunday's opponent. And as mentioned, Indianapolis comes in at 2-1. They have a new old quarterback in Phillip Rivers, and we'll start off with your impressions of what you've seen of Rivers so far.
Rivers has always been one of my favorite quarterbacks in the league. He's an excellent thrower, great accuracy. I think he's up around 78% in the high 70s anyway this year. Reads the field really well. He's a tough guy. He's been very durable, missed very few games throughout his entire career. I think he's a huge upgrade for the Colts, and I think there's just no way they don't make the playoffs. They obviously started off the season slow with a loss down in Jacksonville, but in fairness, anytime a northern team goes to a Florida city for an afternoon game to open the season, it's tough with the heat and the humidity. It just wears the team down. They're not really prepared for it because you haven't practiced in it, especially with that humidity. That was a tough game for the Colts, but they've come back to win the last 2 and won them convincingly.
And if anybody is curious what the White Sox are doing, I have the game on in the background. It starts in just a couple of minutes. So we'll keep you baseball people up to date as well. But you did your research, Greg, because you are absolutely correct. His pass completion percentage is exactly 78%. 72 completions and 92 passes. That's pretty damn good. 794 yards for Rivers. He's got 3 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. and a quarterback rating just under 100 at 99.9. And what I think is most impressive about Indianapolis so far, and let's face it, Phillip Rivers, I think he's a future Hall of Famer. I think that's safe to say.
No question.
What he's done is he spread the offense around. He has hit 12 different receivers in his first 3 games. That's pretty impressive.
Right. And really their number one receiver, T.Y. Hilton, got off to a slow start, but he's dangerous. Not the biggest guy, but has a lot of speed. He can get the home run at any time. They have a rookie, Michael Pittman, who's a big physical guy. And then the other receiver right now is Zach Pascal because of an injury to Paris Campbell. And Zach Pascal's got 7 receptions for 71 yards, another big, tall guy with good length. You know, these guys are going to create a matchup problem for the Bears on Sunday afternoon.
They also have a pretty good tight end in Mo Ali Cox. He's got 10 receptions through his first 3 games. I believe he's got 1 touchdown pass. And running the football, and we're going to hear from Matt Nagy talk about this running back in just a couple of seconds. We're talking about Jonathan Taylor. He was the 2nd-round pick for the Colts out of Wisconsin, and through his first 3 games, he's got 182 yards. He's running, obviously, Greg, behind a really good offensive line. I think that's one of the strengths of this Indianapolis team.
Well, yeah, I think they got the best offensive line in football. And Taylor, you know, he was supposed to split time with Marlon Mack. Marlon Mack got hurt. I think it was in the first game. He's on injured reserve right now. He could be back later in the season. But we saw what Jonathan Taylor, if you watch Wisconsin in the Big Ten, you saw what he can do. He's a big, durable back. He's got speed. He can move the pile, got a lot of strength after contact. And he's just what the doctor ordered for the Colts running game, and they like to run the football.
You know what I like about these Wisconsin running backs once they come into the NFL? They're running behind the same offensive line they had really at Wisconsin, because the Wisconsin offensive line annually has got 5 guys across that are easily 300 pounds, if not more. And then, you know, you're running behind the same kind of offensive line once you get to the pros. But let's hear from Matt Nagy. One of 2 sound bites you're going to hear from Matt Nagy. Here he is, and he's talking about Jonathan Taylor, the Colts running back.
You know, Jonathan Taylor, just knowing what he did last year in college, and now what he's doing now, I have a lot of respect for him as a football player and as a back. I mean, he can when he catches the ball, he can take it the distance. When he hits a crease in a run game, he can take it the distance. But where it all starts is up front, and that offensive line that they have is dominant. They're very physical. They're nasty. They do a lot of good things in the run game. And so we understand that. We know that. And I think if you don't have that line, it's a lot different for any running back. So we're going to have our hands full. Our guys are going to be looking forward to the challenge, but they do a really good job, that unit, that offensive line unit, of working in tandem together and creating a lot of holes for their backs.
You know, Greg, once upon a time, they used to talk about USC as being, tailback central, or whatever they used to call it back in the day. If you got a running back out of USC, you got a good one. To be honest with you, nowadays, if you want a strong, powerful running back, and I think Taylor's 5'10", 225 pounds, give or take, there's been a lot of good. I mean, Melvin Howard, I think is his name, is the other guy who came out of Wisconsin. They've had some good running backs over the last half a dozen to dozen years.
They've had good running backs going way back. When I was with the Giants, we took Ron Dane as a draft choice. He was a former Heisman Trophy winner. I mean, that's what they do at Wisconsin. They run the football first, pass second, and like you said, they always have strong offensive linemen. Most of those guys end up playing in the NFL, and for good reason. They're quality people. But when you look at the Colts offensive line, Anthony Costanzo, Quentin Nelson, those are Pro Bowl type players. Ryan Kelly's one of the best centers in the league. They're big, they're strong, they're physical. I think what's going to be interesting this week, let me back up a little bit. Where the Bears are really going to miss Eddie Goldman, that's this week, because the Colts like to run the football. Goldman was the premier run stopper for the Bears. He's gone. You know, they picked up McCullers from Pittsburgh last week. I wouldn't be a bit surprised if you see him play this week, because that's what he does. He stops the run. And, you know, the matchup I'm really looking forward to seeing is Quentin Nelson against Akeem Hicks. That ought to be an all-star battle.
All right, let's talk about them defensively, the Colts, because they've only allowed 45 points in their first 3 games. Obviously, simple math, that's 15 points a game. 18 points over their last 2 games, although one of them was against the lowly Jets. So defensively, they've been pretty good through the first 3 games of the season. I think one of the standouts for them so far has been one of their star linebackers, Darius Leonard. He's all over the field. He's got 27 tackles through his first 3 games. They've got 9 sacks overall. Their defensive line has been really good at stopping the run and also getting to the quarterback. And their secondary is also outstanding. 6 interceptions by their secondary so far through the first 3 games. So this Colts team, even though they're 2-1, they easily could have been 3-0 minus that Jacksonville game. And they're coming in as the favorites. I'm a little surprised by that, but maybe the odds makers are taking a look at the Bears, even though they're 3-0. That the composite record of those 3 teams is 1-8. So maybe that's why Indianapolis is a slight favorite in this game.
Well, I think you also figure in the fact that home field really isn't home field this year. You got no fans. And so now it's the best team, the more dominant team is the usual favorite. And on paper, I think you got to go with the Colts, even though, the Bears have a change of quarterback for this week. It's still what he's going to do from the start of a game to the end of the game is an unknown quality right now.
All right, we should talk about their kickers real quick. Their place kicker is Rodrigo Blankenship, and their punter is Rigoberto Sanchez. All right, you try and say those 2 kickers' first names fast, real quick, 10 times. Rigoberto. Rigoberto. I can't even do it twice.
No, not going to happen.
Got to test you out there. All right, anyway, let's talk about the Bears, obviously. Nick Foles comes into this game off a high. He had an interception on his first drive, but if you listen to Allen Robinson, that was a touchdown pass. But then he really cut loose, obviously, in the fourth quarter with those 3 touchdown passes. In the first game against Atlanta, he threw 29 passes in a part-time role in that game, Greg. So, we talked about this on our cast Monday. You had to. You're coming from way behind. They were down 16 points. And talking about Nick Foles and listening to him a couple of times this week, he said he was very comfortable already getting right into that game. And let's hear from him right now, where he talked about that he's very comfortable already with the offense because he's basically played it in the past.
I feel really comfortable. And I think that, going in this week, there's been a lot of great conversations. And, even last game, I felt more of myself when I stepped into that situation, just playing and getting to just do things that I like to do in a chaotic situation. So it's, I'm definitely a lot more comfortable than I was, but, that's what this week will be great to go out there and practice and get a preparation week and go through the plays and study the plays and watch practice after practice and fine tune everything. So, I'm hoping by the time it's game time, we've grown even more.
All right, let's hear one more from Nick Foles right now. He's going against one of his old coaches. Listen, if you've been around the NFL a lot like he has already, eventually you're going to go against some of your old coaches. But he's going against head coach Frank Reich, who also was his offensive coordinator at Philadelphia. So here he talks about his relationship with Frank Reich, but also he talked about the Indianapolis defense.
Oh, it's always great seeing Frank. He's been one of my, favorite people I've come across. Playing this game and, having him as a coach, we've always stayed in touch. We still stay in touch. So it'll be great to see him, but most importantly, compete against him and his team. They're a really talented team and, watching them on tape. I know Frank is a coach. I know they're going to be very well coached, but you can see that they play with a lot of energy and they do their assignments really well. So it'll be a really great challenge for us on Sunday.
All right, we're going to hear from Allen Robinson in just a second also, Greg. But I want to ask you, when you go against either a former player or former coach, is there an advantage one way or the other? And how much, because Frank Reich obviously knows him from his days in Philadelphia, what kind of, read will one person have on the other?
Well, here's the thing. Because of the relationship that Frank Reich had with Nick Foles, coaching him in Philadelphia, he knows what he can do, knows what he can't do, knows what he does well. Now, when the Colts are looking at the Bears' offensive scheme, they have to assume that what we've seen play calling wise for the first 3 games is going to change going into game 4, because it's really going to go back to what Foles can do well, a lot of what we've seen Kansas City do in Philadelphia, especially Philadelphia when Foles was there. That's how the Colts are going to prepare for this game. In fact, I talked to the Colts general manager last night, Chris Ballard, and Chris said that exact same thing. You know, they know what Foles can do. He's actually very good in the RPO game. He throws a really good deep ball. He's very accurate on the deep ball. In fact, what Chris said to me was that, you know, a lot of quarterbacks are short to long in their progression. He said Foles is long to short. He likes to go after the deep ball. I think you're going to see that more this week as he gets more into it with players. He's going to get the starters reps in practice this week. So I think what we have seen the last 3 weeks as compared to what we're going to see Sunday going to be totally different things.
All right, let's talk about Allen Robinson now. I thought Allen Robinson, once the quarterback changed, listen, he says whoever the quarterback is, he's going to play his game. But it looked like he was a little bit re-energized, a little bit rejuvenated once Foles came out in there. And listen, these guys probably, even though they might not admit it publicly, I'm sure they probably have their own thoughts inwardly who they'd rather have be the quarterback. And something in my mind tells me that he'd rather have Foles be the quarterback. You know, did you pick up on that, or was that just me?
You know, I think that, you know, when you just look at how Allen Robinson played last Sunday after Foles came in, he had some big plays, but they also got the ball thrown to him a lot. And that's important. And, you know, hey, receivers are divas. They want the ball. And he wants the ball more than anybody else. So, you know, he's going to be happy that he's going to get that opportunity. What did he have, 10 catches last week? He's going to get that opportunity again this week, and that's up to the Colts to try to stop him.
All right, let's hear from Robinson here right now. He says, you know, even though he played with Foles during the preseason, he has to get used to where Foles likes to throw his passes.
Again, you know, I'm a bigger receiver, but I don't view myself as, you know, just a big body receiver, you know, but it does benefit me in a sense of playing outside, being able to get some of those throws, you know, as far as, you know, how he wants to throw the ball and how he and how he sees some of that stuff, you know. So again, for me, it's just, you know, adjusting to, you know, what he likes. You know, again, I mean, he's the guy, like I said before, who's had success in this league, who's played at the highest level and been successful at the highest level, you know. So again, it's just about us just continuing to get those reps and just make sure we stay on the same page.
All right, we're going to hear from Matt Nagy in just a second, one more time, but I want to ask you about the loss of Tariq Cohen here. I mean, obviously, as a running back, as a return man, I think it's going to hurt the Bears. I mean, he already, especially last week, I feel like he was becoming more of a focal point offensively, and they were trying to get him involved much earlier in the game. They did activate, I'm pretty sure he'll be active on Sunday, Artavis Pierce, who was an undrafted free agent. I believe he played, what was it, at Oregon State, was it, Greg?
Played at Oregon State.
Okay.
And he's a guy, he's not the biggest guy. He's about 5'9.5", maybe 5'10" if you're stretching it, 210 pounds, but he runs a legitimate 4.45. He's got good hands. He's a good space player.
All right,
and,
now I know that
the same type of game that Cohen has, but not as explosive.
No, not as explosive. Certainly not as quick either. A little bit bigger body also. They worked out some running backs here over the last few days. I think ultimately they'll sign somebody. I don't know if it's going to be in time for Sunday's game, but would you anticipate that they will sign somebody eventually?
Well, I think the person that they sign, if in fact they do sign him, he'll go on the practice squad. He's not going to be put on the 53. And with the rules for the practice squad this year, you can put as many veterans as you want on that practice squad, and you got to have that guy in reserve who's learning the offense.
Okay. In the first 3 games, the Bears have moved the ball, not very consistently throughout those first 3 games, but they've moved the ball at different times, especially when Foles became the quarterback. But they went against 3 defenses in this first 3 games that I would call some of the better defenses in the league. First, it was the Lions, and then it was the Giants, and then, of course, it was the Falcons this last week. But against Indianapolis, they're definitely stepping up in class defensively against the team they're going against. And here's Matt Nagy talking about Indianapolis' defense.
They're really working in unison right now. That front line, man, they get after you. They're nasty. They really do. And then those linebackers just flat out can run. And then their DBs are opportunistic ball hawks that just make plays. I mean, they are playing really, really good defensive football right now. I think they're well coached, and it's sound football. You see it on tape. I don't care, who you're playing, when you're playing, and why you're playing. They're good. And so we know that we're going to have our hands full. They do a lot of really good things, and we got to be able to match their intensity for sure.
All right, Greg, as I'm looking out my window, you can't see it out my window, but I'm sure out your window also, there's a little bit of rain coming down. It's sort of raw outside. It's very windy. The weather on Sunday is not supposed to be very good at Soldier Field or anywhere, for that matter, in the whole Chicagoland area. Let me just ask you, not only specifically in this game, but in general, if you know the weather in advance is not going to be, made to order for an offensive, shootout kind of game, if you know the weather's going to be raw and windy and cold and all that kind of stuff, does that change your game plan going into a game?
I think the coaches prepare for that going into the week, and that's how they set up their game plan, knowing what the weather conditions are going to be. Right now, it says it's going to be in the mid-50s with a chance of rain. I think there's a 50% chance of rain. So, excuse me, one way or another, it's not going to be ideal weather like they've had in the first few games. And, but both teams got to play in that weather. So, and the Colts are a dome coach, so it could affect the Colts a little bit more than it affects the Bears. But let's get back to the Colts defense again. Bears fans should be very familiar with what the Colts run on defense. They basically run the Tampa 2 scheme, same scheme that we ran here in Chicago when Lovey was the coach. The keys to that defense are you got to have a 3 technique, and you got to have a will linebacker, and that's exactly what the Colts have. Their 3 technique is DeForest Buckner, who they traded with the 49ers for during the offseason. He's a big, dominant, athletic defensive lineman, and then that will linebacker is Darius Leonard, who's one of the the best will linebackers in football. Very, very instinctive, big-time playmaker. And so when you have those components for that particular defense, that's what makes it go.
Greg, obviously they made the quarterback change Matt Nagy did in the third quarter, going to Nick Foles after pulling Mitch Trubisky. Let me just ask you, even before we talk more about the quarterback position going forward, there's been some, conversation that maybe Trubisky, even though he's not going to be the quarterback unless there's an injury probably going forward, that you could utilize his talents in certain situations, whether, you bring in a quarterback, for a specific run play, if you will, or some other kind of things that you can use with a mobile kind of quarterback. Do you think that Matt Nagy will at least think about that, if not implement that, using Trubisky in a reserve role in certain situations in a game to utilize his talents?
He's done that in the past, David. He's done it with 2 quarterbacks, with Trubisky here when Chase Daniel was here, and they had both of them lining up. Not a lot, but it was probably total of 4 or 5 times over the last couple of seasons. So yeah, there's a chance that we could see that, not necessarily this week, but sometime in the future.
Okay, now let's talk about quarterbacks going forward. I said right then and there, I think I tweeted out, I hope that the quarterback class for the next draft in April is a good one, because I don't think there's any question the Bears, maybe not in the first round, but at some point fairly early in the draft process, and I haven't seen what picks they have right now, they're going to go after a quarterback, because I think they already know, especially after pulling him in the third quarter in the last game, that he is not going to be their quote-unquote franchise young quarterback going forward. And I know you said that Foles could be the quarterback there for the next 3 or 4 years. I'm 50-50 on that one because of his track record, even though you say that he's only 31, 32, and quarterbacks like a Phillip Rivers can play into their late 30s. But I think they already, in their minds, this is my opinion, they're already going to start taking a look at the next potential young quarterback for their franchise. And so looking at the first-round quarterbacks, if indeed that's what they do, I mean, obviously Clemson's Trevor Lawrence is going to be the first one selected overall unless he's injured during this college season, and the Jets for sure are going to need a quarterback. Ohio State's Justin Fields, even though I haven't seen 1 minute of him play, you would think that he's probably going to go high. And so a lot of these quote-unquote mock drafts already have the Bears taking North Dakota State Trey Lance. He's 6'3", he's 224. What, if anything, do you know about him, and do you think that the Bears will go at least early on for a quarterback?
Yeah, I don't know a lot about him, only because he's been a starter only 1 year at North Dakota State, and that's at the FCS level. put up big time numbers. He's a big athletic guy. Now, what North Dakota State is doing, interestingly, because they know he's going to enter the draft for next year's draft, is they had originally, canceled their season like a lot of teams in that conference. They're going to play one game, and it's going to be next month, and that's just to showcase the quarterback. But still, you're going to have a quarterback coming from a lower level of comp, hasn't started a lot of games as a college quarterback. It's asking a lot to say, okay, this guy's going to be a first-round draft pick. And I'm just being, the normal scout in saying this. The draft nicks can say, oh, okay, he's going to be in the top 10 or he's going to be in the top 15. You got to wait until you do all your research, and it takes a long time to do that. And it's going to be months before people make up their mind whether he's good enough to be a first-round pick.
Of course, Carson Wentz came out of the same situation, although I think he had a little bit more playing time, and he
and in fairness, Carson Wentz broke his arm like in the fourth game or fifth game for North Dakota State his last year, sat out, and then came back to play in the playoffs.
And obviously was a high first-round pick and has played pretty well, although he's been battling injuries so far in his NFL career. Here's the part that scares me about Trey Lance, and it's in conjunction with Trubisky. Trubisky played, 13 games in college? That's it, even though it was at a higher level?
Started that.
Okay. It just scares me. I don't care what kind of talents the kid has, and obviously you're probably seeing some highlights right now that he's pretty damn good. But when you don't have that much experience, even though college is not the pros, it just sort of scares me. And because of what's going on with Trubisky, I mean, you want to get somebody who's tailor-made or ready-made, I should say, to play in the NFL. And when you don't have that experience, even though it's at the college level, it scares the heck out of me, Greg.
Well, the problem, as it turns out, with Mitch is that he's not quick to process things. And that he gets into, for lack of a better word, say brain freeze on the field, doesn't make quick decisions to get the ball out of his hand. That's sometimes tough to do when you're watching or tough to do as far as evaluating to see how they do that because of the nature of the offenses that they're playing in. And so you might not necessarily see that ability to make quick decisions and get the ball out of their hand very, very quickly. So part of that's going to be in the interview process when you're putting stuff up on the board and then taking them out on the field. Again, it's way too early to say this guy's going to be a first-round pick. In fact, he can come back next year. It's not a lock. He could play that one game next month and be terrible in that game. And then, he's going to have to make a decision. So you can't always go on what the draft nicks say. We've seen times when, they say a certain player at the beginning of the year is going to be the first pick in the draft, and that guy doesn't even. And a perfect example, Teddy Bridgewater. Mm-hmm. Going into that college season and all through the season, Teddy Bridgewater was the hands-on favorite, according to the draft nicks, to be the number one pick in the draft. He went the last pick in the first round. And, so it's a totally different situation. So, let's let things play out and start. And don't talk about it in the end of September, beginning of October. We'll talk about it next March.
Yeah, I tend to get ahead of myself. I always do that when we talk about stuff like this.
That's because you're more media than I am.
I am. You're right. You're 100% correct about that. When I say this about this kid, Trey Lance, I guess we could say the same thing about Justin Fields, who's going to be the quarterback, obviously, for Ohio State. And maybe that's why he was pushing and had all these people sign these, documents for him to try and play this upcoming season. And he'll play at least 8 games, maybe 9 or 10 potentially if they get to the conference championship and then get into the playoffs. So he might play as many as 11 games, but he won't have that much experience either. And they're already talking about him being a top 5 pick.
Well, if you look at his numbers last year, his numbers were pretty good, but still, that's his first year as a starter, as a real starter. And so now you're going to want to see what he's going to do this year. He's not going to have any softies on the schedule. It's always going to, be against Big Ten competition. And then if Ohio State does in fact get into the college football playoff, then we got to see what he does against those schools also. Again, David, right now, to me, way too early. When I talk about the draft and college football prospects, I go through a process in my own mind. And when I worked for the Bears, when I worked for the New York Giants, we didn't even start talking about the players as a group until December, and that's when you started to eliminate players, and then you talked again in February and then again in April. You go through this process, and the first part of the process is elimination. Get rid of the players that you don't want, and then concentrate and do more work on the players that you have an interest in. And then you make a decision where you think they go. Are they first round, second round, third round, etc.? To say that stuff now, to me, it's just media talk and stuff for conversation, but no seriousness to me at all.
I got to give some kudos to our producer and our barkeeper, in charge, Aldo Gandia, because all I have to do is make mention of a name. There he is. Hey, wave, Aldo. All I have to do is make mention of a name. I'm going to start mentioning names of like these really good-looking women, because he's going to find some videotapes of them and put them right up there. But Aldo is really quick on the draw. All you got to do is just say somebody, and he's got some tape of them. So kudos
Aldo,
to
you've
Aldo.
been real quiet today, buddy. You got to speak up a little.
I have been. I'll tell you what. I love college football draft talk. So Greg, play along with us because we love this stuff. Everybody in the chat room already is speculating on who the Bears
I know.
next season. Fun stuff.
I can't get into it yet. It's too early.
But let me ask you this, Greg. I mean, do you not agree that? And listen, Ryan Pace said every year he's going to draft a quarterback, and of course he hasn't done that. But this time around, don't you agree that he's going to have to draft a quarterback? I think he's come to his own conclusion finally that Mitch Trubisky is not what he thought he was going to be, is not going to be that franchise quarterback going forward. He was yanked out of the game. And Nick Foles, to Ryan Pace's credit, came in and did the job like he's supposed to do. But I really believe that now he's going to have to go out and get a young quarterback to establish going forward again. So that's why I'm talking about that.
Well, you're not going to agree with me here. I'm going to argue with you a little bit because you got to go one step at a time. Let's get through this season, or let's get through the first 4 or 5 games with Nick Foles at quarterback and see how he plays. And then that is going to determine what the actual need is for a quarterback come next draft. Now, they got Tyler Bray. He's been he's been in the league now for like 6 years. He's played in this offense his entire career. It's a player that they like. When he plays in the preseason, he plays good. Is he good enough to be a quality NFL backup? I don't think any of us know the answer to that. But, I think before the season is out, that may be something we do find out, depending on how the season goes, so they can have enough information to make these decisions going forward.
Aldo, help me out here, Aldo.
All right. So here's the question, Greg.
Okay.
In the 9 seasons that you were the director of college scouting for the Chicago Bears, at what point did your scouts start scouting players, even if you had a quarterback? When you had Jay Cutler, weren't you already looking at quarterbacks from the beginning of the season just because you had to?
You look at every player. You got a list of players.
Right.
Well, okay, let me explain how we did it, because we had 6 scouts and they were in 6 different areas. They never left the area. Unlike others, scouting departments, they didn't leave their area and go for 2 or 3 weeks into another area and cross-check. Our cross-checks were done after the season and strictly via tape, and we had a position scout. In other words, like Ballard did the defensive backs, who's a great evaluator of defensive backs. Jeff Shiver did the tight ends. Mark Sadowski, who's the director of college scouting now, he did the defensive line. We assigned the people who were very good at that specific position to cross-check, and they might do 25 or 30 guys in the draft to do some sort of cross-check. On top of that, I was looking at guys. The position coach is going to look at guys. Jerry was looking at guys. We're getting probably a total of 6 reports on each individual player. But the area scouts, they're responsible for all the people in their area. And they can reject a guy. And if they reject a guy, then I'm unless I see something that's different or Jerry saw something that was different, we went with what their opinion was. And they were all very, very good scouts. And the record speaks for itself. We drafted 12 Pro Bowl players in the 9 years I was there as a scouting director.
All right, Greg, we're going to go around the NFL in just a moment, but I want to ask you about one more player on the Bears, and he hasn't done that much, at least reception-wise, and I'm talking about Cole Kmet. but I'm sure he's learning on a daily basis. And what a person to learn behind in Jimmy Graham, who I think is giving the Bears so far what a lot of the fans and what the franchise wanted him to do. He's up to, I think, 10 receptions and 3 touchdowns. And he became much more of a focal point in this last game against Atlanta. And who knows, maybe that's in conjunction with Foles as well. But what have you seen out of Cole Kmet in the small amount of time that you've witnessed him so far?
Well, he's gotten play time. He just hadn't had the ball thrown to him.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's only been targeted in 3 games, maybe 3 times. And I don't have the stats right in front of me. He has been effective as a blocker. But I think, go back just to what you said before. Last Sunday, Graham had 6 or 7 receptions?
6.
6, okay. Excuse me. And once Foles got into the game, the tight end became a vocal point of that offense. You're going to see that going forward. I think that's going to translate to more touches for not only Graham, but more touches for Kmet.
All right, again,
it's part of it is who's playing quarterback and how he's looking downfield and what receivers is he looking for.
And we're still going to see both those guys on the field at one time. Isn't that been sort of the plan also?
Yeah, there was situations where they had all 3 out there.
True.
In fact, there were some plays when there was 4. Holtz was out there too.
4 tight ends. Wow. Okay.
I'd like to add that, there's a lot of fans out there who are getting worried that, this is a wasted draft pick because he hasn't played.
Bullshit.
Exactly. Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about how long it takes for a tight end, even one who comes out of college with a lot of polish, how long does it take for a tight end to acclimate himself to NFL play?
Well, I think it goes to every player individually. How quickly can they process the information, pick up the offense, and play to full speed? I don't think the Bears have any problem with that as far as what Kmet does. All the reviews from the coaching staff have been excellent. Says he's got great football character. He picks things up quickly. He's adjusted well to the pro game. He hasn't had the opportunity of the ball being thrown to him in the first 3 games of the season. Is that his fault? Hell no. That's what Mitch was doing as a quarterback. We saw, and I'll go back to what I said a few minutes ago. We saw when Foles came back into the game, he started throwing the ball to the tight end. You're going to see more of that this week. And then the people who were doubting the draft pick will shut up.
And I think the best thing that Kmet has going for him is that he's playing behind a former All-Pro player, Jimmy Graham. I mean, my God, it used to be like at UCLA, they would get somebody who would be a freshman who would learn behind Jabbar, who would learn behind Walton. The same thing at USC with running backs. I mean, if you're good like you're supposed to be, which obviously he was in college, his talent is going to prevail at some point, but he's learning the pro game from one of the best of all time at that position. It's going to pay off in dividends somewhere down the road.
Yeah, but we got to point out one important thing, David. They really play 2 separate positions. Jimmy Graham is the move tight end, okay? You can call him an F, you can call him a U, you can call him an H, depending on what the terminology is for each individual offense. Cole Kmet can play that position and he can play the Y because he's got size, he's got strength, he can block. So, in essence, he's learning 2 positions. Graham's learning 1 position. He has lined up inside a few times, but predominantly they want him flexed out.
All right, let me go back to the quarterback and Nick Foles for a second. And we heard from him earlier on that he feels very comfortable because he's played this offense in 2 previous stops. Do you think the playbook opens up more so with him starting now because maybe he can do more things with this playbook than Trubisky could?
I think you can guarantee it that what you're going to see on offense this week is going to be a lot different than what you've seen the last 2 years. I think it's a stone cold lock.
Specifically how? What do you think? What else?
Number one, just look at how quickly he processed and got the ball out of his hand in the game last week, and he spread the ball around. There's just different things he can do. I think it opens up the offense to do more things. And so it's going to help the running game. It's going to help the passing game. He's going to take his shots deep. It's going to open things up underneath. He's going to utilize the receivers better than Mitch did. They could just the overall scope of the game plan is going to be a lot deeper than we've seen because of what he can do and his experience in this offense. It's not like he's new to it. He's played in this offense for several years and actually played his best football as a pro, MVP in the Super Bowl because of how he played in this offense.
Okay. All right. Before we get to the specific games around the league coming up on Sunday, I want to ask you about, I don't know if you saw this. I guess the Cleveland Browns center, and I think his name is J.C. Treader. Is that how you say his name?
Yep.
Okay.
Another Buffalo guy.
Very good. He's also the president of the NFL Players Association, and he called for all NFL surfaces to be changed to strictly regular turf and to abolish artificial turf, because I guess not only the Players Association, but so many other places that do the research on this show that there's a lot more injuries that are on artificial turf. You know, I understand where he's coming from. He's trying to protect his players and everybody in the association. Can you see this happening at some point down the road?
Not going to happen. How are you going to do that in the Dome Stadium? You can't. The stadium has to be built. You know, you do it in Arizona. They do it because the field can be rolled in and out. But how are you going to do that in Indianapolis? How are you going to do it? And I think they have the capability to do it in Houston, but most of these dome stadiums, you don't.
And that's a good point.
Right. And then you look at, personally, I think they should have artificial turf at Soldier Field. They go through about 3 or 4 different grass surfaces during the course of a season there.
Yeah, well, the Park District's got money, even though they say they don't.
Yeah, but it's really not up to the Park District when the grass gets changed. It's up to the Bears.
Okay.
And if they call for it to be changed, and Kenny Maroc does that, if they say, hey, we got to change the turf gets changed.
You know, you mentioned out in Arizona and Glendale where the Cardinals play, obviously, and they do. They can roll it literally out of the stadium, the grass field, to let it grow under normal circumstances, and then they just wheel it right in and place it down on the field. It's really amazing when I saw that happen out there.
Yeah, and we were out there in 2006 for that. You were at that special game, I think.
Yep.
And that we made the big comeback, and that was the first year of that stadium, if I'm correct on that. And yeah, it was a phenomenal piece of engineering. But all stadiums aren't that way. And I think, field turf is a lot safer, a lot more comfortable, a lot softer than the old AstroTurf was. Now, I can agree with the complaints that people from the Players Association had with the old AstroTurf fields, but field turf is and that type of substance is a little bit different animal. And I think there's, and I don't have all the stats in front of me, so I'm not going to talk out of my ass, but there's a lot of injuries that happen on grass too.
I played on that AstroTurf at the old Metrodome out in Minnesota. I think I told you this, we played a softball game there one time before a White Sox Twins game, and that turf was like a concrete. Literally, it was as hard as concrete. I would have been scared to death playing a football game and falling on that.
First time I played on it was at the old Three River Stadium. Remember that stadium in Pittsburgh when I was in college? And you're right, it was hard.
Okay.
Hey, guys, real quickly,
yes.
Steven Zimmerman in the chat room said he's a young guy. I know him. He's in his early 20s, and he was asking about the AstroTurf field in Soldier Field. That was one of the worst AstroTurfs in the history of AstroTurfs. I mean, from what I heard from players in their post-game interviews, it was like playing on concrete. You guys have any experience on that field or touching that turf or anything like that?
Nope. I think anytime I was at Soldier Field, they had grass.
Okay.
Since I could, now, did I see games on AstroTurf there? Yes.
Right.
But that personally there was grass.
Greg, I predated you going to Soldier Field with Bear games. And yeah, I was on that field and almost any AstroTurf field, specifically that one and some other ones, it was like concrete. I would have been scared, to take a fall on something like that. So I would agree with the person who just checked in. Greg, before we go to the games that are going to be played this upcoming weekend, I want to ask you about one that's not going to be played. Tennessee at Pittsburgh. Obviously, it's been an ongoing story the last few days. Tennessee has had not only some players, but also some other members of the organization that have tested positive for coronavirus. And now they finally, first they said the game was going to be moved to Monday or Tuesday next week, and now they're just saying it's going to be moved somewhere down the road. I mean, here's the NFL that is trying its best, just like Major League Baseball, like everybody else, in dealing with the situation. And not only dealing with that game specifically, but there was a report earlier today. The NFL has already fined a couple of coaches $100,000 in the organizations for not wearing the mask on the sidelines. And now they're threatening, supposedly, and I'm sure it's true, they're threatening if people don't do what they're being required to do, they could have draft picks taken away from the organization. I mean, this is getting pretty serious. The NFL is trying to ensure that these games will be played and the season will be completed.
In talking to Chris Ballard last night, we talked about that. And he said the league has put the onus on the teams to comply with all the protocols. And if you get a bunch of guys that test positive, that's your fault. And it's because they haven't acted responsibly as far as protecting themselves and protecting their teammates. And so if you got to go into a game and you got to bring up 5 or 6 guys from the practice squad to play, tough shit. That's what you got to do. And the league's not going to feel sorry for you. That's why they wanted to play this game on Monday or Tuesday, if at all possible. But more people, in fact, I talked to another guy down in Tennessee today, has nothing to do with the Titans, but they have a problem in Nashville right now. So this could be a thing that goes on. They're supposed to play Buffalo next week, and it could fall into that. But the league has, I think in this case, they can adjust the schedule because of the bye weeks and get the games in. But there's going to end up being a team that ends up getting screwed. I think Pittsburgh could be one of them because they could end up down the road, going on the road 3 times in a row.
You say there was a problem in Nashville. I got to recite the story real quickly. I was down there for a Bears game, I don't know, 5, 6, 8, 10 years ago. I don't remember what year it was. Here's a problem. There were so many Bear fans that came down there that weekend from Chicago to Nashville. It's a great town, by the way, that the bars literally ran out of beer. Now, that is a problem. Not only in Nashville, but almost anywhere. And yeah, Aldo's going, it did. The bars ran out of beer. A lot of those places, because the Chicago fans came, God bless you, Chicago Bear fans, they drank the damn bars clean out.
Okay, that story reminds me of a story, and as long as I'm thinking about it, I'm going to bring it up. 2 years in a row, I went to the old Japan Bowl, if any of you guys remember that game.
I remember.
It was in Tokyo, and I went in 1991 and 1992. And they would put the coaches, the players, and the scouts that went all on the same plane going to and from Tokyo. So you'd leave out of LAX and fly to Tokyo on a Sunday morning. That plane was dry when we were 2 hours out of Tokyo. And that's water, soda, alcohol, and beer.
Oh.
Everything. And it was all players.
Oh, man.
As long as that didn't go up into the cockpit and, they ran it dry also, then you're okay. All right, let's talk about some of these games coming up on Sunday that will be played. The Cleveland Browns, for the first time in God knows how long, are over 500 going into a game. They're at 2-1 against America's team at Dallas. They're 1-2. What do you think, Greg? Can the Browns stay above 500?
Where's the game?
It's in Dallas.
There's going to be fans in Dallas. I'm going.
There will be some fans.
There's fans in Cleveland too. So, those are 2 places that allows fans. In fact, Chris, another part of the conversation, Chris told me, I guess in Indianapolis, it's up to the mayor to decide how many people can go, and they come up with an arbitrary figure. In Indianapolis, it's 7,500 people they're allowing in.
Okay. All right. So you like Dallas in that game, I take it.
Right.
All right. New Orleans at Detroit. Detroit got lucky, and Matt Patricia's coached for at least one more week, but they're both at 1-2. What happens in this game, Greg?
The surprise of the season so far is New Orleans is 1-2, and they haven't played good. And Drew Brees is starting to look like a 40-year-old quarterback.
Yep.
But I still think Detroit sucks, and New Orleans is going to bounce back on that one.
I agree.
What's your take, David? You got
I agree. I agree with that one. I think, I think the Lions are just a stupid and bad organization. So, yeah, I'm going with New Orleans. All right, Minnesota and Texas, Greg. I know these are 2 coaches. Well, one of them you don't really care for down in Houston. Anyway, both teams are 0-3. I'll be honest with you. The loser of that game, they might as well fold their 10th, and the season's basically over. I don't know if any team, well, I'm sure there's been one or two along the way that started 0-4 and made the postseason, but it's real rare. So what do you think happens in that game?
And that game's in Houston, right?
It is.
Okay, I'm going to go with Houston. And that one, I just think that the Vikings defense is struggling bad, and the quarterback's not playing very well.
I agree with you. Did you ever think that Minnesota would start off 0-4?
No, but I like it.
Yeah, I'm sure you do. All right, how about this one? This is one of the featured games of the weekend. It's New England 2-1 against Kansas City 3-0. Listen, Kansas City made mistakes in that Monday night game, and they still won by 2 touchdowns. I mean, they're already, to me, already the class of the NFL again.
And that game is.
It's either late Sunday or Sunday night.
Where is it in New England or
no, Kansas City?
Kansas City. They can have fans too.
Okay, so whoever has fans.
Well, it gives them some sort of home field advantage.
Yeah, but if they're in New York for the Jets or actually New Jersey, those fans are booing.
Well, if it's in New Jersey, they don't have anybody there. They don't allow it. It's an empty stadium.
I know. So
80,000 seat stadium with nobody in it.
That's an ugly place on top of it. All right, how about your hometown Buffalo Bills? They started 3-0, and they have probably the MVP leading candidate already in the AFC, and Josh Allen.
Remember Russell Wilson? No, Russell Wilson's the NFC.
That's right, different conferences. So Buffalo 3-0 going into Sin City in Vegas at 2-1. Who do you like in that one?
I'll tell you, that could be. You got a cross country trip. Game's going to be late in the afternoon. That could be a tough game for Buffalo, but I still think Buffalo's going to win.
I do too. All right, and then we finally get to the Bears game on Monday. I think it's going to be a close game. I'll give you my pick up front because I've been picking game by game by game from the beginning of the season. So far, I'm right 3-0. I had the Bears losing this game at the beginning of the season, and I'm not going to change my pick. I think this is a 1-point game, and I think Indianapolis wins as the soon-to-be kicker for the Bears misses a late field goal. Aldo doesn't like what I just said. Sorry.
I think it's going to be a close game, but Nick Foles, we're going to see a different Bears offense this week, and because of that, we're going to see the Bears win in a close one, maybe by 3.
Okay, well, don't forget the weather might not be good. It might be really windy. It might be raining. I think that will factor into this game on Sunday. I'm going to stick with Indianapolis winning a 1-point game.
And that's a good point. And right on paper, the stronger run game belongs to the Colts, and that's another reason why, if you think that's going to be the situation, they bring up McCullers and play him in that game because of his size and strength and ability to hold the point of attack.
And let's face it, he's a defensive lineman himself. What is he, 6'7", 350 some odd pounds?
Right. I mean, he's a tough guy to move off the ball. So
yeah, I'd say so. All right, guys, that'll wrap it up. We'll be back on Monday as we'll recap and dissect the game thoroughly from start to finish. Any closing thoughts on either of you two guys' parts?
Well, I can't believe that you're picking the Bears to lose this game. And I've been putting up your Twitter handle throughout the show. You're losing followers as we speak right now. I'm just kidding. No, I think it's going to be a close game. I always hate predicting games, but I do think that the Bears are going to win. And hopefully you're wrong, David.
Hopefully I'm wrong also.
Know how you lose followers on Twitter?
How?
Yeah, I know how you lose followers.
Tweet something that is conservative, and you lose right away. Uncle Twitter starts taking followers away from you. It's an automatic process.
But you know what, Greg? You can go the opposite direction and tweet something liberally, if you will. You're going to still lose a sect of people no matter what you do.
No, personally, I don't think when you gain and lose followers like that. I think when you gain followers, it's legitimate. When you lose a bunch of followers in a couple minutes, that's Twitter's doing that. They're taking followers away from you, and it's been talked about on Twitter. They, the way they censor things.
See, when I lose a bunch of like a dozen Twitter followers at a time, I just figure that's old girlfriend saying, F you to me or something like that.
Hey, before we leave, Greg, you got a message for this Packers fan who is on our chart in our chat room?
What's he asking?
Doesn't matter. He's a Packers fan.
Packers suck.
There you go.
All right, guys, we'll be back on Monday with a audio podcast. We'll break down the game from start to finish. It's been fun, and I'll talk to you then.
Okay, guys. See you next week.
Bye-bye.